Have you ever felt confused when a man suddenly stops talking, leaving you wondering what went wrong? Or perhaps you've been the one to go silent, curious about what's happening in his mind. These moments can be unsettling, leaving you with questions about what silence truly means in relationships. Imagine this. You've been texting someone consistently, sharing your thoughts, time, and energy. Then one day, you decide to stop. No texts, no calls, no updates. What happens next? Does he notice? Does he care? More importantly, how does it affect the dynamic between you two? In today's video, we're diving deep into the male psyche, how a man reacts when silence replaces connection. We'll explore what he feels, why he acts the way he does, and how you can reclaim your peace and emotional independence using the timeless wisdom of Stoic philosophy. This isn't about playing games, it's about understanding how to set boundaries and protect your self-worth. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to navigate these situations with clarity and confidence. But before we dive in, I'd love to hear your stories. Have you ever stopped talking to a man? What was his reaction? Share your experience in the comments below. Let's create a space where women can learn, grow, and support each other in building stronger, healthier relationships. Now let's get started. 1. His self-esteem takes a hit. When you stop talking to a man, something profound happens. His world shifts, and so does his sense of self. Communication is not just words exchanged, it's a validation of presence, attention, and connection. When you withdraw, his ego feels the void, and he begins to question his value, not just to you, but also within himself. This reaction stems from a loss of control, the unsettling realization that he is no longer the center of your attention. Initially, he may not recognize the depth of this discomfort. It begins subtly, glancing at his phone, wondering why you haven't texted, or questioning if he did something wrong. These small moments grow louder, feeding a spiral of self-doubt. For someone accustomed to consistent attention, the silence becomes deafening. Once reinforced by your constant engagement, his self-esteem now starts to waver. And what about you? At first, stepping back might feel like an act of defiance or even regret, but slowly, a calm emerges. You realize the power of silence isn't in punishing him, but in reclaiming yourself. The energy once spent on explaining, fixing, or chasing shifts inward, and with it, a new sense of peace begins to take root. This shift in dynamic is fascinating. The more you pull back, the more he feels the need to reassert his presence. In his mind, your silence is a puzzle to solve, and as he tries to figure out why, his attention naturally redirects toward you. Suddenly, he's seeing you in a different light, not as someone easily accessible, but as someone whose presence carries weight. One evening, let's say you're scrolling through social media. You notice he's posted something, a vague status, or a shared memory you both laughed about. It's a subtle nudge to test the waters without directly reaching out. This small act reveals more than he realizes. It's not just an attempt to reconnect, it's a sign that your absence is felt deeply. For women, this is a pivotal moment. It's easy to feel flattered or tempted to respond immediately, but this is where Stoic wisdom comes into play. Stoicism teaches us that our value isn't tied to someone else's recognition or reaction. Marcus Aurelius reminds us that what disturbs us is not the event itself, but how we interpret it. His discomfort is a reflection of his inner struggle, not a call for you to fix it. In moments like these, the most powerful thing you can do is hold your ground. Please resist the urge to reassure him or fill the silence. Instead, ask yourself, what does this situation reveal about his character? Does his reaction come from genuine introspection, or is it driven by a need to regain control? Let's consider another scenario. Perhaps he sends you a direct message like, "Hey, how have you been?" His tone is casual, but the intention is clear. He wants to gauge where he stands with you. Instead of rushing to respond, take a moment to reflect. Does engaging align with your boundaries and values, or would it reopen a dynamic that no longer serves you? The Stoic path here is one of self-respect. You're not ignoring him to play games, you're prioritizing your peace. By stepping back, you've created space not just for him to reflect, but for you to grow. You're no longer seeking validation from someone else, you're building it within yourself. Women often underestimate the power of their silence. It's not just the absence of words, it's the presence of strength, clarity, and self-worth. By pulling back, you're sending a message far more profound than any explanation could convey. I value myself enough to let go of what doesn't honor me. If he truly values the connection, he'll respond with effort and respect, not manipulation or entitlement. And if he doesn't, that too is an answer, one that frees you to invest in relationships where your worth is recognized from the start. This isn't just about him, it's about you. Silence, when used with intention, is a transformative tool. It forces a recalibration of how you view yourself and how others perceive you. It's a statement of self-respect that says, I am enough. So let's pause and reflect. Have you ever witnessed a man's attitude change after being met with silence? Share your observations below. Your stories might inspire others to reclaim their power too. 2. He tries to make sense of it all. When the communication stops, his mind begins working overtime. The sudden silence feels like a riddle he's desperate to solve. He replays conversations, examines your behaviors, and overanalyzes the moments leading up to your decision. For him, this isn't just about what you did, it's about understanding why. This period of reflection becomes both a search for answers and an attempt to regain a sense of control over the situation. You've likely experienced this shift too, but from a different perspective. While he's trying to make sense of your silence, you're rediscovering your clarity. Pulling away doesn't happen without reason. It often comes after moments where you felt unseen, unheard, or taken for granted. Those realizations, though painful, are what pushed you to create space for yourself. Now, imagine him sitting there, phone in hand, rereading your last texts, or replaying a disagreement in his mind. He questions if he missed the signs, if he said something wrong, or if he simply wasn't enough. His confusion grows because silence has a way of magnifying what words cannot. It forces him to face his own role in the dynamic, whether he's ready for that accountability or not. This phase is where the pull of your silence becomes most powerful. Without realizing it, you've shifted the focus back to you. The energy that once revolved around him now surrounds your absence. In his reflection, he begins to see you differently, not as someone predictable or easy to access, but as someone whose presence mattered more than he acknowledged. Take, for example, a woman who decided to stop responding to her partner's half-hearted efforts. She didn't explain or argue, she simply stopped engaging in the cycle. At first, he assumed she needed time or space, but as days turned into weeks, his confidence wavered. He started asking himself questions. Why did she stop? Did I push her away? These questions led him to recognize moments where he had dismissed her needs or taken her presence for granted. But here's the important part. Her silence wasn't designed to provoke guilt or manipulate his feelings. It was a statement of self-respect, a choice to prioritize her peace over his confusion. From a Stoic perspective, this phase aligns perfectly with the teachings of Epictetus. He emphasized that we can't control what others do, but we can control how we respond. Your decision to step back isn't about his reaction, it's about reclaiming your energy and setting boundaries that reflect your worth. For women, this stage is often bittersweet. Watching someone wrestle with their emotions can stir feelings of empathy or even guilt. But remember, his process of making sense of the situation is necessary for his growth. The discomfort he feels isn't yours to soothe, it's his to learn from. Now think of another scenario. Perhaps he reaches out to mutual friends, subtly asking if you're okay or trying to gauge your state of mind. Or maybe he starts sharing posts that seem unusually introspective, as if he's signaling regret without directly addressing you. These actions show how deeply your silence has impacted him. What's most important during this time is that you resist the urge to clarify or reassure. Doing so would only shift the focus away from the reflection he needs to do. Instead, remain steady in your decision. Trust that his process, while uncomfortable, is a necessary step for him to understand the dynamics of the relationship and his role in its current state. From a Stoic lens, this period of reflection isn't just about him, it's about you too. As he questions his actions, you have the opportunity to do the same. Were your boundaries clear? Were you prioritizing his feelings over your own? Reflection on your part helps you avoid falling into old patterns if he eventually reaches out. When handled with wisdom, this phase becomes a transformative period for both parties. For him, it's a chance to recognize what he took for granted. For you, it's a moment to affirm your worth and rebuild the emotional independence that may have been lost in the relationship. So what do you think? How do you imagine men process these situations? Do they turn inward, seek external validation, or blame others? Share your thoughts below. We're eager to hear your perspective. 3. He tests your reaction. When your silence lingers, he begins to test your boundaries. It's a subtle, almost instinctive response, a way to gauge where he stands and whether your distance is permanent. Men, like anyone, fear losing control of a connection, and this fear often translates into small but calculated actions designed to provoke a reaction. It might start with a casual text, "Hey, been thinking about you." Simple, non-threatening, and intentionally vague. Or perhaps he posts something on social media, knowing you might see it. A throwback photo, a cryptic quote, or even a status update that seems unusually personal. These small gestures are not random. They're his way of knocking gently at the door, waiting to see if you'll let him back in. This phase reveals an important truth. When you stop giving him the attention he once took for granted, the dynamic shifts. His attempts to test your reaction are less about genuine connection and more about reclaiming the certainty he's lost. For you, these moments can be both affirming and challenging. It feels good to be noticed, but there's also a temptation to respond, to reassure, to engage. Imagine this scenario. You receive a late-night text from him saying, "I saw something today that reminded me of you." It's specific enough to feel meaningful, but vague enough to avoid direct accountability. Your first instinct might be to reply, fueled by curiosity or nostalgia. But this is where emotional discipline becomes crucial. What does responding accomplish? Does it align with your boundaries, or does it pull you back into the very cycle you're trying to break? From a Stoic perspective, this is a test not just of his intentions, but of your resolve. Seneca's wisdom teaches us that true freedom comes from controlling our reactions and not being swayed by external pressures. His actions may be designed to provoke a response, but how you choose to handle them is entirely within your control. Let's look at another example. Perhaps he suddenly posts an inside joke you shared on social media. The memory is warm, familiar, and deliberately placed to draw you in. It's easy to feel a tug at your emotions, to consider commenting or liking the post as a way of reconnecting. But ask yourself, what message does that send? Are you reestablishing boundaries, or are you signaling that his subtle tests have worked? This is where the beauty of silence lies. It isn't passive, it's an active decision to prioritize your self-worth over someone else's attempts to regain control. By holding back, you're teaching him that your attention isn't something to be tested or manipulated. It's something that must be earned through respect and effort. Your value as a woman isn't in how quickly you respond or how much you accommodate. It's in your ability to stand firm in your boundaries and let your silence speak for itself. This isn't about playing games or withholding affection. It's about making a statement that your peace is non-negotiable. From his perspective, your lack of reaction sends a powerful message. It forces him to sit with his discomfort, to question why he feels the need to test your boundaries instead of addressing the core issues directly. This discomfort is necessary for growth, both for him and for the dynamic between you. Stoicism reminds us that control is an illusion when it comes to others. You cannot change his actions or intentions, but you can master your response. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. His attempts to test your reaction are not your responsibility to manage. They're his to navigate. For women, recognizing these subtle tests is a moment of empowerment. It's an opportunity to reaffirm your worth and practice emotional independence. Instead of engaging, redirect your focus inward. Use the energy you've saved to invest in yourself, whether it's pursuing a hobby, spending time with loved ones, or simply enjoying the peace that comes from setting boundaries. So, have you ever noticed these small tests from a man after you stopped talking to him? Was it a text, a social media post, or something else entirely? Share your observations below. Your experiences might inspire others to recognize and navigate these moments with grace and strength. 4. his emotions run high. Emotions often rise to the surface when silence fills the space where connection once existed. For him, this silence isn't just an absence, it's a mirror reflecting the weight of his actions or inactions. It's in these moments of quiet that frustration, sadness, or even regret begin to take hold. The emotional highs and lows he experiences are his response to the realization that what he once took for granted is no longer within reach. Your decision to step back wasn't impulsive. It likely followed a series of moments where you felt unseen or unappreciated. Perhaps you reached out repeatedly, offering understanding and effort, but your efforts weren't reciprocated. That imbalance gradually took its toll until finally, you chose to prioritize your peace. Now, in your silence, the dynamic has shifted. He's left alone to process the emotions that follow. Anger at losing control, sadness from the void, or regret for not valuing you when he had the chance. But here's the remarkable part. The very act of stepping back has redefined how he sees you. What he might have once dismissed as predictable or constant has now become a source of longing and curiosity. This emotional turbulence he feels is a testament to the power of creating space. Your silence speaks volumes, forcing him to grapple with the absence of your presence in ways he may not have anticipated. Imagine a scenario where he sends a string of texts, first casual and then increasingly emotional. "Hey, just checking in." Then, "I've been thinking about us." Finally, "Why did you stop talking to me?" Each message reveals a layer of his emotional state, from casual curiosity to genuine confusion and frustration. For him, this isn't just about reconnecting, it's about soothing the discomfort that silence has created. For you, it's a pivotal moment, a reminder of how much strength it takes to stay true to your boundaries. Stoicism offers profound wisdom here. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, you have power over your mind, not outside events. His emotions are his to process, just as your decision to step back was yours to make. You're not responsible for managing his feelings or easing his discomfort. Instead, your focus should remain on maintaining the emotional balance you've worked so hard to reclaim. Another example illustrates this beautifully. Picture a woman who, after months of carrying the emotional weight of a relationship, chooses to step back. Her partner reacts with anger, sending messages that attempt to shift the blame. You could have said something instead of just going quiet. In the past, she might have felt compelled to explain, to defend her actions in the hope of diffusing his frustration. But this time she pauses. She realizes his reaction says more about his inability to handle discomfort than it does about her choices. This isn't about being unkind or indifferent. It's about understanding that his emotional highs, whether anger, sadness, or regret, are natural responses to a shift in the dynamic. By allowing him to experience those emotions without stepping in to soothe them, you give him the space to reflect and grow. At the same time, you reinforce your worth, showing that your peace isn't something you're willing to compromise. For many women, witnessing a man's emotional reaction can evoke empathy or even guilt. But it's crucial to remember that emotions are not inherently bad, they're simply signals. His frustration may signal a loss of control, his sadness may point to unspoken regret, and his anger might reveal his struggle to accept change. None of these, however, are reasons for you to compromise the boundaries you've set. This is where Stoic resilience becomes your ally. It teaches you to remain steady in the face of emotional storms, not by suppressing your feelings, but by acknowledging that you're not responsible for calming the storm in someone else's mind. Instead, focus on your own calm, your own clarity, and the steps that align with your values. Now think back. Have you ever seen a man's emotions run high when faced with silence? Did his reaction surprise you or confirm something you already suspected? Share your observations below. Your insights could help others recognize these emotional patterns and navigate them with wisdom and grace. 5. He finds ways to justify himself. The silence you create does more than stir emotions. It compels him to confront his role in the relationship. For some, this confrontation is too uncomfortable, so they turn to justification. He starts crafting narratives, not for you, but for himself. These stories help him rationalize the situation, minimize guilt, and shield his ego. It's a defense mechanism, a way to cope with the growing realization that something significant has changed, and that he may have played a part in it. The human mind seeks clarity, even when it comes at the cost of truth. Instead of facing the discomfort of self-reflection, he might convince himself that the issue lies with you. She's overreacting, he might think, or she's always been too sensitive. These thoughts are his way of regaining control in a situation where he feels powerless. What's important to remember here is that his justifications are not a reflection of your actions or worth. They're an attempt to avoid accountability. This phase can also be emotionally triggering for you. Hearing or sensing that he's dismissing your feelings may ignite a desire to correct him or defend yourself. But stepping back wasn't about proving a point, it was about reclaiming your peace. His narratives, however skewed, are his burden to carry, not yours to unravel. In many cases, his rationalizations stem from a place of vulnerability. He might replay moments where you expressed concern, frustration, or sadness, and twist them into proof that your silence was inevitable. This rewriting of events helps him reconcile the loss without addressing the deeper truth. His lack of effort or appreciation contributed to the distance. Picture this: a man telling his friends, "She just stopped talking out of nowhere. It's not my fault." This deflection may win him sympathy in the short term, but it does little to help him grow. Meanwhile, you've chosen a path of self-respect, one that prioritizes inner clarity over external validation. For women, hearing such justifications can feel dismissive, even hurtful. But Stoic philosophy reminds us that we cannot control the judgments of others, only how we respond. Epictetus famously said, "It is not things themselves that disturb us, but the judgments we make about them." His need to justify himself is not your truth. It's his way of managing his discomfort. Another example highlights the strength of silence. A woman, tired of being the emotional caretaker in her relationship, steps back. Her partner, instead of acknowledging his lack of support, starts telling mutual friends she always made things more complicated than they needed to be. In the past, this woman might have rushed to explain herself, defending her actions and pointing out his shortcomings. But this time, she remains silent. Her silence isn't about conceding, it's about recognizing that she doesn't need to participate in a narrative that diminishes her worth. Stoic resilience teaches us the value of emotional detachment. By stepping away from his justifications, you free yourself from the exhausting cycle of trying to be understood by someone unwilling to truly listen. This is not indifference, it's a commitment to protecting your peace and energy. His justifications also reveal a deeper truth about the relationship. If he's more focused on rationalizing his behavior than on reflecting on what went wrong, it's a clear sign of emotional immaturity. Conversely, a man willing to admit his mistakes and grow from them demonstrates the kind of emotional depth that fosters meaningful connections. This is your moment to shift your focus inward. Instead of engaging with his narratives, ask yourself, were my needs being met in this relationship? Was I heard and respected, or did I often feel dismissed? These reflections help you see the silence not as an absence, but as an opportunity for growth. For viewers, this stage often brings a mix of clarity and pain. It's never easy to hear someone justify actions that hurt you, but understanding that his defenses stem from his own limitations, not your shortcomings, can be empowering. His reaction doesn't define you, your response does. So, have you noticed someone trying to rewrite the narrative after you pulled away? Did it reveal something about their character that you hadn't seen before? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your stories may inspire others to navigate this phase with grace and strength. 6. He thinks about moving on or not. Silence has a way of creating crossroads. For him, the absence of communication stirs an internal struggle, a tug-of-war between moving forward and holding on. He begins to weigh his options, torn between the need to reconcile and the instinct to protect his ego. The silence becomes a space where he questions what the connection means, whether it's worth saving or if letting go is the easier path. His reflection isn't just about you, it's about his identity within the relationship. Men often associate a connection with the purpose, and when that connection fades, it forces them to re-examine who they are without it. But this process isn't linear. Some moments are filled with determination to reach out, while others are shadowed by fear of rejection or the discomfort of vulnerability. For you, this phase may feel eerily calm. The storm of doubt and guilt that often comes with stepping back has settled, leaving room for clarity. You've started to see the bigger picture, how much energy you poured into a relationship that may not have valued your worth equally. And now, in his absence, you're no longer chasing answers. Instead, you're finding them within yourself. This pull he feels to either move on or reconnect is deeply influenced by the energy you project. Silence isn't just the absence of words, it's a reflection of boundaries and strength. By stepping back, you've shifted the dynamic. He no longer sees you as someone easily accessible, but as someone who commands respect. Picture him scrolling through old photos or messages, hesitating to press send on a text. He drafts a message but deletes it, unsure if it will reach you the way he intends. His internal dialogue becomes louder. Does she miss me? Was I wrong? Is it too late? This hesitation shows that your silence has created a ripple effect, forcing him to confront emotions he might have avoided otherwise. Take, for example, a woman who ended communication with someone who continuously dismissed her needs. Over time, her partner begins to see the emptiness left by her absence. He oscillates between thinking I should move on, and what if I try one last time? The silence becomes his teacher, and in many cases, his struggle. From a Stoic lens, this phase teaches both parties about the power of detachment. The Stoics believe that true peace comes from letting go of what you cannot control. For him, this might mean accepting the outcome of your silence, whether it leads to reconciliation or not. For you, it means understanding that his decision to stay or go doesn't define your worth. Marcus Aurelius said, "Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together. But do so with all your heart." If he chooses to move forward without accountability, it's not a failure. It's a revelation. His actions reveal where he stands emotionally and whether he's capable of meeting you at the level you deserve. For women, this is a powerful moment of self-discovery. Silence allows you to see his true intentions without the distraction of words. If he reaches out, does his tone reflect respect and a willingness to grow? Or does it come from a place of entitlement? And if he doesn't, does his absence give you the closure you didn't know you needed? Another example paints this vividly. A man, realizing the depth of his feelings after his partner's silence, decides to reach out. But instead of apologizing or showing vulnerability, his message is filled with casual remarks, avoiding the real issues. In this scenario, the woman chooses not to respond. Her silence isn't dismissive. It's a statement. She understands that growth and genuine effort require more than a half-hearted attempt at reconnection. This phase is a reminder of the importance of boundaries. By stepping back, you've shown him and yourself that your time and energy are valuable. Whether he decides to move on or not, you've reclaimed your narrative. Have you ever witnessed someone struggle with the decision to move on or reach out? How did their response shape your perception of the relationship? Share your insights below. Your experience might resonate with others navigating the same journey. 7. He tries to reconnect. As time passes, he feels the weight of your silence more profoundly. It's no longer just a void, it becomes a challenge, a lingering question in his mind. His thoughts cycle between regret, curiosity, and a desire to regain what was lost. These emotions push him to take action. He starts to find ways to reconnect, testing whether the door is still open or if it's been firmly shut. For a man, reaching out after a period of silence is often layered with vulnerability. It could be a simple text, "Hey, how are you?" meant to sound casual but carrying the weight of unspoken emotions. Or perhaps he tries to ease back into the dynamic with a shared memory. "Remember when we went to that place you loved?" Each attempt is calculated, not just to reconnect, but to gauge whether you're willing to engage again. This phase is deeply revealing. His words, tone, and timing tell you more than you might initially realize. Is his message sincere, reflecting introspection and effort? Or does it feel like a shallow attempt to regain control of the situation? Understanding his intent is key, but it's equally important to reflect on your response. Your silence has already shifted the balance of the relationship, and how you choose to respond or not can reinforce that shift. In many ways, this moment mirrors the strength you've built during the silence. The decision to step back wasn't easy. It required courage, clarity and a deep commitment to your self-worth. Now, as he reaches out, you have the power to set the tone moving forward. Does his effort align with your values? Is he genuinely interested in growth, or is he simply uncomfortable with the silence you've maintained? Let's imagine an example. A woman, after months of carrying the emotional weight in her relationship, chooses to stop engaging. At first, her partner doesn't notice the depth of the change, but as days turn into weeks, he begins to feel the absence of her energy. One evening, he sends her a message. "I've been thinking a lot about us. I miss how things used to be." Her first instinct might be to respond, driven by the familiarity of his words and the hope of reconciliation. But instead of reacting immediately, she takes a moment to reflect. Is this message about him recognizing his role in the distance, or is it simply his discomfort speaking? This pause is where her strength lies. By considering her response carefully, she ensures that her boundaries remain intact. Stoic philosophy offers a guiding light in moments like these. Epictetus said, "It is not things that disturb us, but our interpretation of their significance." His attempt to reconnect isn't inherently good or bad. It's neutral. What gives it meaning is how you interpret and respond to it. For women, this is an opportunity to reaffirm the lessons learned during the silence. You've already reestablished your worth outside of his validation. Whether or not you choose to respond, your decision should reflect the values and boundaries you've embraced. Another scenario illustrates the importance of emotional clarity. A man, after weeks of silence, suddenly shows up unannounced. His words are apologetic, but his actions lack consistency. He wants to reconnect, but doesn't acknowledge the behaviors that caused the distance in the first place. In this situation, the woman chooses not to re-engage. Her silence becomes a boundary, a way of saying, "My peace is worth more than empty apologies." This doesn't mean cutting someone off without consideration. It means understanding that reconciliation must come from mutual growth and effort, not from a fear of losing connection. His attempts to reconnect are an invitation, not a demand. And you, standing in your strength, have the choice to accept or decline based on what serves your peace. As Marcus Aurelius reminds us, waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. His effort to reconnect isn't the validation you need. Your worth was never dependent on his attention, and his actions now are simply a reflection of his readiness, or lack thereof, to meet you where you stand. For viewers, this phase is a chance to reflect on how you've handled similar moments. Have you experienced someone trying to reconnect after a period of silence? What did their actions reveal about their intentions? Share your stories in the comments below. Your experiences can inspire others to navigate these situations with wisdom and grace. 8. He decides to grow or stay stuck. Faced with the silence and the reflections it forces upon him, he reaches a turning point. This is the phase where he must choose, grow from the experience or remain stuck in patterns of denial and blame. The absence of your presence has created a space for him to see himself clearly, unfiltered by your support or reassurance. In that mirror, he sees his actions, his choices, and ultimately, the person he has become. This decision isn't easy. Growth requires vulnerability, a willingness to admit fault, to accept that his actions may have contributed to the silence, and to take steps to change. For some, this is a daunting task. It's far simpler to stay in the comfort of old habits, justifying past behaviors rather than challenging them. But for others, the discomfort of silence becomes a catalyst for transformation, pushing them toward accountability and personal growth. As for you, this phase can feel like closure, even if he hasn't explicitly given it to you. By now, the reasons you stepped back have crystallized. The weight of carrying a one-sided relationship, the exhaustion of overextending yourself, it all feels distant, as if the silence gave you space to heal and see your worth clearly. And the beauty of it is that you no longer wait for his decision to validate your growth. Whether he chooses to evolve or not, you've already taken control of your narrative. Imagine a man who, after weeks of silence, begins reflecting on his behavior. He realizes he dismissed your needs, ignored your boundaries, and allowed complacency to erode the connection. Instead of blaming you for stepping back, he starts working on himself, reading, journaling, even seeking advice from those he trusts. He doesn't rush to reconnect. Instead, he focuses on becoming someone worthy of the connection he lost. Now, consider another scenario. A man who refuses to grow, instead deflecting responsibility. He tells himself, "She overreacted, it's her loss." His decision to remain stuck isn't a reflection of you, but of his inability to face the discomfort of growth. In both cases, his choice reveals who he is, and neither changes the progress you've made. From a Stoic perspective, this phase embodies the principle of focusing on what you can control. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." His decision to grow or remain stagnant is beyond your influence. What remains within your control is how you move forward, how you protect your peace, and how you ensure your future relationships align with your values. For women, recognizing this shift is empowering. You see the value of your silence not as a weapon, but as a boundary, a way of saying, "I respect myself too much to settle for less than I deserve." Whether he grows or not, you've shown that your worth is not contingent on his perception. Another example highlights this beautifully. A woman, after months of being emotionally drained, steps back from a relationship. At first, her partner reacts with anger, blaming her for the distance. But as time passes, he begins to understand the depth of her decision. He reaches out not to apologize or reconnect, but to acknowledge his mistakes and express gratitude for the lesson her silence taught him. This, she realizes, is growth. Not just his, but hers as well, for creating space where growth could occur. For some viewers, witnessing this decision-making process in a partner may feel bittersweet. There's hope when someone chooses growth, but there's also peace in accepting that not everyone will. The Stoics remind us that this isn't a loss, it's clarity. You've seen the truth of who they are, and with that truth, you can make choices that honor your values and boundaries. Have you ever witnessed someone at this crossroads? Did their decision surprise you, or did it confirm what you already suspected? Share your experiences below. Your insights may inspire others to approach these moments with wisdom, patience, and self-respect. The silence you choose to create in a relationship isn't just an absence of words. It's a powerful statement of self-worth and emotional independence. It's a boundary that redefines how you're perceived and how you perceive yourself. Through the lens of Stoic philosophy, we've explored how stepping back invites reflection, growth, and clarity for both you and the other person. This journey isn't about controlling someone else's reactions or decisions. It's about mastering your own emotions and prioritizing your peace. Marcus Aurelius reminds us that we are responsible for our minds, not the actions or judgments of others. Each stage we've discussed, from his initial confusion to his decision to grow or stay stuck, reveals more about the dynamic than words ever could. Your silence can become a teacher, not only for him, but for you. It teaches patience, resilience, and the strength to prioritize yourself when faced with emotional uncertainty. By practicing these principles, you align yourself with the core Stoic values of self-control, wisdom, and inner peace. Take this lesson forward. Begin small, pause before reacting, set clear boundaries, and let go of the need to explain your silence. Over time, you'll find that these practices don't just improve your relationships, they transform how you see yourself. Now it's your turn. Have you ever experienced the transformative power of silence in a relationship? Did it shift the dynamic or reveal truths you hadn't seen before? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might resonate with someone seeking clarity and inspire them to take a step toward their growth. Remember, every decision you make from a place of strength and self-respect is a step toward a life of peace and fulfillment. Keep practicing. You are worth it.